Hello, everyone, and welcome to Herding Squirrels, a podcast about modern teens. Today's guest is Jossie Haines, an executive and leadership coach for technology leaders with 25 plus years building and scaling software engineering teams at Apple, Tile, Zynga, and American Express. She's passionate about retaining and advancing women in tech while serving all technology leaders. Jossie specializes in helping leaders navigate promotions, new roles, and strategic AI integration, cutting through overwhelm with her practical, kind approach she calls loving accountability. Welcome, Jossie!
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to play with some Legos.
For your first build, Jossie, what I'd like you to do is build a model that tells a story about who you are outside of work.
All right. So I've got kind of like a two-piece build going here.
Okay.
So there's these two parts, right? And this one actually has multiple meanings. So one of the things I love to do is sit in my backyard on my hammock reading a book with my dog. So that's supposed to be my little hammock there, right? I have 25 palm trees in my backyard. So that's my backyard palm tree situation. And so yeah, that's supposed to be me like chilling in my backyard, relaxing, hanging out with my dog. The little gray Lego there is supposed to be the dog who's now falling off. Hanging out, checking out the hummingbirds. I was trying to get some flowers attached there, but couldn't find anything to attach these little flower pieces to. So there was that. The other thing I enjoy really doing about like when I'm outside home is being in nature. And so that's where this little piece came in. So this was supposed to be like me hanging out at the beach with and this is supposed to be like the waves coming in with a sunset going on here. So that's part two of the multiple interpretations of the of the Legos. There is like being out in nature and connecting, and like I said, when at home I love to read and a passion for reading, and I really enjoy just thinking about how instead of being very stressed out like a lot of us are in tech, how do I live a life that is not the typical one? So, all right.
For your next build, Jossie, I want you to think of the best team experience you've ever been a part of, maybe as a participant or a leader, whichever you want to choose. I want you to build why that experience was so amazing.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Let's see your build.
All right. So there's, again, I seem to build these like two-part things.
It's very common. Very common.
So let me give a little bit of backstory and then I'll explain like what these things are. So I joined Zynga in 2010. So for people who don't know, Zynga is a gaming company. Back in 2010, it was like the biggest gaming company that was on Facebook. It basically is what helped scale Facebook and grow it. Lots of people shared, Facebook notifications for games and things like that. In 2010 was when Facebook started charging Zynga for monetizing on their platform. And so I joined Zynga the week we took on Facebook. And it was the craziest time to join a company from the perspective that, and this is why you said, like, what's a team memory that feels so, like, unique and special? And it was, so game companies are usually segregated, so, like, each game is kind of its own studio that's almost run independently, and then there's, like, a central tech team. And the entire company, for 2 weeks, starting literally the day I joined, pivoted to building our own social network so we could kind of prove to Facebook, well, if you screw us enough, like, we will pull off of Facebook. And there was just so, it was amazing to me watching 1,000 people, like, in 2 weeks build a social network and just pivot. Like, I've never seen the entire rest of the time in my career watching so many people just get aligned on a mission. We worked crazy hours. Like, it's the first time I've ever joined a company and worked like a 60-hour week the first week that I was in the company, and really like thrived. And we really thrived and created something by the end of the 2 weeks, right? And so this was supposed to be Facebook off on its side, like being our little competitor, taking us on over there. And well, I mean, we were on their platform, but and this was supposed to be like the representation of Zynga and all the teams coming together. So the little eyes are supposed to be like all the different teams and all the people in them. And then it was the flag of success because we were able to do it. And I put all these like, I had it like, there's all these like little stick pieces that I put together, which was supposed to represent, like we were all in this one big building and the different teams were all over the place. And so this is like how we all got brought together we were all in this building in San Francisco called, it's 444 DeHaro. And so it was like, how do we bring all the different teams together? And then this was supposed to just be like a little fun, like, oh, we're taking off. So it's like a little representation of that. So that was the team story.
Jossie,
Yes.
That's fantastic. I just, while that's fresh in your mind, I want you to build a model of the opposite now. I want you to think of what is the most nightmare team. You don't have to say the company name. In fact, it's you not. But think about, but why, right? What is the, like, you know, you're at, why was this such a bad scenario? Was it a leader? Was it whatever it might be? But again, rebuild a model. Think of the worst team or just working scenario you've been in and why it was so challenging and maybe what it taught you about leadership or teams.
All right. So here's my my little build for this story, and so this is the story of the company that almost made me leave tech entirely. You know, it was interesting because on the outside looking in, it looked like I was very successful. And I managed 3 teams, which were all building amazing products that were very well known around the house staples. But yet I didn't feel included at all while there. And it was very much a culture of politics. It was very much a culture of like, who do you know, instead of like really recognizing worth and value and a difference of opinion. And I actually started the women's ERG there, and I had wanted to start a mentoring program. And the VP at the time for the organization, he didn't believe in mentoring. And so he actually had his admin tell me that no, I couldn't start a mentoring program as part of my women's ERG. And so this Lego was really me feeling isolated on one side and like not knowing how to thrive in this situation. And over on the other side, like one of the stories I would always talk about is that, you know, because I was actually the first female engineering manager on this team, despite it having been around for 5 years. Like, I was talked about, like, the guys would go out to, like, have drinks or go out to lunch, and I think in my 2 years there, I might have been invited to join people for lunch, like, less than 10 times. And so this is, like, everybody else, like, hanging out, like, kind of being bros, like around the lunch table, and I'm just like over on the other side trying to figure out like, how in the world do I thrive in this environment where I ended up feeling like a ton of imposter syndrome. Like the story basically goes, I left thinking I was a terrible manager and that I just couldn't cut it. And then the day before I left, one of my team members actually came to me and said, you know, you're the best manager I've ever had in my career. And it was a little bit eye-opening on like, oh, like okay, like maybe I have some perspective shifts I need to think through here. But yeah, it was, I realized when I started my next role, I had a little bit of PTSD when I didn't get any emails at night at like 10 o'clock at night. And after a week of this, I was like, people aren't including me. Like, I must obviously not be wanted because nobody's emailing me at 10 o'clock at night. And I had this conversation with my boss, and he's like, we just don't regularly send emails every night at 10 o'clock at night. It's okay.
That sounds honestly horrible. Like, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Like, yeah, the feeling of isolation. Like, and honestly, your model, it's really powerful. Just to even look at that, like, you can visually see the separation of, right, you standing on one end, and of course, why wouldn't you feel a level of imposter syndrome and wondering, like, is it me, right? Am I actually doing the right thing? So, A, thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry you had to go through that. But B, it sounds like you found a much better environment in your next role. And that, I kind of want to dig into that term a little bit, is just environment. What do you think goes into a quality work environment? What makes an environment good?
I love this question because this is something I very much geek out about. So it's about the culture. And it starts with the top, right? It is hard to have a good culture if leadership is not embodying that culture. And it's about, and it's about values, but not in the way that's often done in the tech industry. And what I mean by that is, how many times have you worked at a company or you've seen a company where they have values? And there are these pretty things that are up on this poster, up on the wall. And they get talked about once every 6 months at performance review time when there's one question on your performance review that says, oh, how did you uphold the company values in the last 6 months? And then 6 months goes by and nobody talks about it again until like performance review time comes around. That's not building an intentional culture of inclusion and high performance and psychological safety, right? And we can have a whole conversation around how inclusion and high performance are actually directly tied together. The Google research on high performing teams actually talks about this, right? The key being psychological safety being one of the key components of this. And to me, it is the success to this, and this is what also makes it really hard, is what are those little things that you are doing on a daily basis to make your values a reality. So for example, at Tile, we created a very unique, inclusive culture that to this day, I still have people reach out to me and say, Josie, what we had at Tile is really amazing, and I miss that. And I didn't realize at the time just how unique it was. But the key was, and it was the little things that we did, right? It was everything from in our weekly all hands, like every slide we had like 5 values and they had little icons that went with them. And on each slide in a company all hands, there was a little icon that went along with it that said like, how is what we're talking about here related to one of our values? We also, in our Slack channel, we had those little icons, and anytime somebody did something that exemplified a value, people would share the little icon emojis to recognize that. We talked about the hard things of when that come along with inclusion, which is you're not always doing it right, and when somebody actually gave feedback on something, we addressed it and looked and changed, right? And it was exemplifying this across like all aspects of the organization and recognizing team members for doing so. We actually had like quarterly values awards where we actually recognized team members for these things. And and it's not any one of these specific things that created that culture where people were thriving. it was really the combination of all of these little things, and leadership, caring, and exemplifying, and then recognizing, allowing the individuals to also make it their own and bring their own ideas into it. And so it really, I always say, like, yes, there were a few of us who were leading like Tile's inclusive culture efforts, and yet I recognize it was entirely a team effort. Like, it would not have been successful without the leadership team's buy-in and willingness to invest in this, as well as, having an organization that embodied the values that we had.
I really like how you put that out initially, of like it starts with leadership, but then tied into, but it's not all leadership. It's almost like leadership sets the stage, right? They create the rules of the sandbox.
Yeah.
But then it is up to, right, unleashing everyone else in service of the values. I want to take that and jump into a related but different topic, and this is more or less the topic of change. And it feels like we're going through constant change right now, right? We've just gone, somehow the pandemic was 5 years ago now. It doesn't feel like it. But in that time, we have everything from remote work to hybrid work to now we've got AI integrating in a ton of different ways. It feels like normalcy has just gone out the window. How are you seeing leaders navigate this? Who's doing it right? Or who at least has the right ideas so far?
Yeah, it's funny. I literally just used that analogy about the plane, like 30 minutes before our call on a coaching call with one of my coaching clients. Speaking about change, in fact. So I just had this conversation. I think leaders need to start by recognizing there is a lot of not just change, but uncertainty right now. And it isn't even just uncertainty in the tech space. It is uncertainty in the world, political climate, there's a million things going on right now where there's a lot of uncertainty. And then I think that gets exacerbated by things like social media, which then like polarizes it and makes it seem like the sky is falling every day. And so I think first it starts with really leaders recognizing that we right now are in a situation where people are getting more burnt out than ever because of change and the uncertainty that's going on. And so our jobs as leaders is to help our teams navigate that and realize that we might not have all the answers, and sometimes that's the biggest thing we have to be admitting to our team members is, hey, I don't have all the answers, but yet here's what I do have. Here's what I can help tell you so far. And even when there's a positive change, right? The analogy I give in this is, let's say you're getting married, right? Hopefully that's one of the happiest days of your life, right? But with any change comes a loss of some type, right? When you're getting married, maybe you're moving out of your apartment, maybe you're there, and we often don't give people time to recognize and acknowledge and process the loss that comes with change. And our brains, as humans, are also wired to think that change is not safe, right? If we actually go and look at the human brain and how we were wired, change means a tiger is going to come attack us in our caveman days, right? And so we really need to recognize as leaders that we have a lot of uphill battles even when a change is positive. And so we need to help our teams navigate that, while we also, I always say, it's like they say on the airlines, you have to put your oxygen mask on first before you put on others. So you need to we're doing the work yourself to navigate change and uncertainty. And if that means learning how to regulate like your social media consumption, you know, what you need to do to like meditate and regulate your nervous system, so then you can show up and help your team navigate the changes that they are facing and trying to provide them as much clarity as possible, that is also very key as well.
I think so many good points. I want to dive into all of them, but the one that I really think you've hit on is this need to, I'm going to use the word grieve, right? This loss of whatever you thought was going to happen has now shifted and changed. And do you think organizations understand this? That they understand the pace and the time needed to, like people need a beat, right, to figure this out, and they have to use different mental heavy lifting to create new habits, to create change in however they do things, right? So you had an emphatic no, and I kept talking. Say more.
I think, you know, even if it's a positive change, right? I've been through let's use acquisitions as an example, right? Like I've been through acquisitions. I have coaching clients through acquisitions, and there's always this like, let's just reinforce this is a good thing and it is positive for the team and all these things. And yes, I'm not saying just like dwell on the negative, but at the same time, these are human beings who, especially going with the acquisition example, who are having a major change, right? Their team culture is potentially changing. What they work on is changing. They might be losing colleagues who are being let go. They might be working with different team members. Like, there is a ton of change. And even if it ends up being a positive thing, you also need to let them process the loss, right? And really, and you can do that still through a celebration, right? It's like, you know, when people pass away and they do celebrations of life, right? That is still allowing somebody to grieve through a positive way. But it is a recognition that things are changing. And even in a situation where you do a celebration of life, somebody might still cry. And it is also about allowing people to have whatever human emotion it is that they need to do. Because so often, like especially with engineers, right, we have very logical brains, and we kind of shove our emotions down, and they're like, they're not healthy, emotions aren't good to show in a workplace, and all these things. And I'm not saying go like screaming around and yelling at people, but yet the more we would the more we help people actually process the human emotions, the better it would be to actually then be able to go and get the change navigated sooner and more effectively, instead of having people feel like, oh my gosh, I have to just pretend I'm totally happy with all these changes that are going on in the world right now.
Yeah, it's amazing how impactful, right? Even just having the space, the mindset, the ability, the time to handle these things. Jossie, I could go on for hours, but we need to get back. We have time for one more build. And I always like to finish with this build. I want you to imagine that you have a room full of ICs, and they're all about to embark on their first leadership role. I want you to build the Jossie leadership model of advice for this.
So this was a hard one, because I was like, oh my gosh, how many, there's many things I could be talking about, and like, how do I get this all into one little build? So it's like, if somebody is a brand new leader, and these are, what do I really want to embody? And this actually comes from one of the first management books that I read, called Being the Boss. And I very much resonated with this, and it is something I help so many of my new leaders through, because I think it's such a valuable thing to think about. So the thing that the book really talks about, that I really believe in, is you're managing yourself, you're managing your team, and you're also managing up to your leadership level. So that's kind of like the three pillars. And these are all obviously like the little bridges, is because this is all interconnected, right? The information is going back and forth from up and down the pipeline. But it does start with first, like I was saying earlier, putting on your oxygen mask first. Like, you need to learn how to manage yourself, right? You need to learn, your emotional intelligence, right? How to communicate effectively, how to manage your time, like what are your biggest priorities. Then you need to be able to manage the team effectively, right? You don't want to be micromanaging the team, but you also don't want to be going to the other extreme where you're trying to be a people pleaser so much that you're not actually providing them guidance and the structure that they need. And you also need to be motivating the team in a way that resonates with the team. On the flip side, you also have to be managing up to either your direct manager or even the executive team. And what your direct manager and the executive team might care about are very different things than what your team cares about. And especially for the engineering leaders, you often need to have very different conversations because your team might care a lot about the technical complexity of something, and your CEO could care less about how technically cool this problem you're trying to solve is and wants to understand the business impact. And so you have to learn how to communicate like up and down this like ladder basically all the time. And so that is one of the biggest, and then at the same time staying grounded in the middle, right? Because like you're basically in the middle, and not that, that's why there's the bridge going back and forth, not that the management doesn't directly talk to your ICs sometimes, but you are really the bridge, like helping that communication pathway. And so this is one of the big key pieces of advice that I give ICs who are going to become leaders is this is really your job, right? And often, when ICs look to become leaders, one of the biggest questions I ask them is why? Why do you want to become a leader? Because if the answer is, I want to grow in responsibility, or even I want to make a bigger impact, I often say, you don't have to go become a manager to do those things, right? And in fact, the biggest leaders are not the ones, like, they're enabling their teams to make the huge impacts. And that is how they are doing the impact. But you might stop getting as much recognition as you were as an IC. And a good leader is not just telling their team what to do, right? So it's really, when people go to become leaders, I really focus on why. And part of it needs to be I really care about growing and developing individuals, because that is what a huge part of leadership is all about.
Awesome. I love it. Fantastic. Thank you, Jossie. Jossie, I have to ask, what was it like building your thoughts and ideas out of Lego bricks?
Oh, it was fun. And I mean, as I mentioned, I love Legos. So sitting down with some Legos comes naturally. But I do have to say, as an engineer, I'm very much let me follow the instructions. So this whole just let me get to play with Lego pieces and put things together and create stories was a very fun take on the Lego experience that I usually don't do. So I really enjoyed that. I work a lot on storytelling, so really thinking about now how do I incorporate the Legos into the storytelling was a really interesting aspect as well.
Well, I definitely enjoyed your models. I'm sure our audience will as well. Jossie, where can our audience find you on the internet if they want more information?
So the best place to find me is either on LinkedIn or just look up Jossie Haines, or on my website, which is jossiehaines.com. I have, if you go on LinkedIn, I have a guide for technology leaders on AI workflows. One of the big things that I'm helping people work through is how to integrate AI effectively from the leadership side these days. And I'll give you the link so you can put that in the show notes. But yeah, feel free to send me a connect request or DM me on LinkedIn. It's the best way to chat with me.
All right, fantastic. And yes, as you noted, we will have all of that in our show notes if you're looking for those links. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, Jossie. This has been an absolute blast. And thanks for joining us on Herding Squirrels, where we uncover the nuts and bolts of teams.